Every single year, millions of people pack their bags, book their flights, snap their photos, and leave 5-star reviews, completely unaware that the ground they're standing on has a story that no travel brochure would ever dare to print. And look, that's not an accident. These places are beautiful on purpose. They're marketed, polished, and presented in a way that makes you forget, or maybe never even know what happened there. But today, we're pulling back that curtain, because history doesn't disappear just because someone built a gift shop on top of it. Let's start somewhere most people would never think twice about: the island of Poveglia, sitting quietly in the Venetian lagoon in Italy. From the water, it genuinely looks like something out of a dream. Overgrown, ancient, romantic in that crumbling European way. But Poveglia is widely considered one of the most haunted and disturbing locations in all of Europe, and the reasons why are hard to shake once you know them. During the Black Death in the 14th century, the island was used as a quarantine colony, a place where plague victims, and allegedly even people who were only suspected of being sick, were sent and never came back. Mass burials took place there on a scale that's difficult to comprehend. Then, centuries later, in the early 1900s, a psychiatric hospital was built on the same grounds. Patients who were sent there allegedly reported experiencing visions and hearing voices, which, given the setting, isn't entirely surprising. There were also deeply troubling allegations about the treatment of patients by at least one doctor on staff, though the full truth of those claims has never been fully verified. The Italian government has kept the island closed to the public for decades, and it remains off-limits to this day. Fishermen in the area have long allegedly refused to drop their nets near its shores. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, there's something undeniably heavy about a place that has absorbed that much human suffering, and then just sat there quietly in the middle of a tourist destination. Now let's talk about a place that millions of people visit every year with absolutely zero hesitation: the Colosseum in Rome. And before you think, yeah, I know about the gladiators, just hear this out, because the reality of what that structure witnessed goes so far beyond what most people picture when they imagine ancient entertainment. The Colosseum held somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators at its peak, and the events held inside weren't just gladiatorial combat. Executions were carried out there publicly. Wild animals were transported from across the known world, often dying in the process, just to be used in staged hunts for crowd enjoyment. Historians estimate that over the centuries of its active use, hundreds of thousands of people and over 1 million animals lost their lives connected to the events held in and around that arena. People take photos there every single day, do their tours, buy their little miniature replicas, and it's genuinely a remarkable piece of architecture. But there's something worth sitting with when you realize that the floor you're admiring once had a drainage system specifically designed for the events being held above it. History is complicated, and the Colosseum is one of the most complicated places on Earth. Moving across the world now, to somewhere that feels almost impossibly peaceful when you first arrive. Bali, Indonesia. Lush, spiritual, one of the most Instagram destinations on the planet. And while Bali itself is a place of deep culture and beauty, there's a chapter of Indonesian history that unfolded right there that most visitors never hear about. In 1965 and 1966, following a political upheaval in Indonesia, a widespread purge took place against alleged communist sympathizers across the country. The estimates of lives lost during this period range from several 100,000 to over 1 million. The exact numbers are still debated by historians and have never been fully accounted for by the Indonesian government. Bali, with its small geographic size, was hit especially hard relative to its population. Mass graves from this period allegedly exist across the island. There are communities there today whose families were torn apart during those months, and whose history is still not openly discussed or taught in the way that many historians argue it should be. The rice terraces and temple ceremonies are real and beautiful, but so is this history, and the people who lived through it deserve to have it remembered. Here's one that might actually surprise you: Edinburgh, Scotland. Not because people don't know Edinburgh has a dark past, but because the full picture of just how dark is something most visitors only skim the surface of. The city's underground vaults, which run beneath the South Bridge, are a popular tourist attraction now. Ghost tours, history walks, the whole thing. And it's genuinely fascinating architecture. But those vaults, which were built in the late 1700s, became home to some of the city's most desperate residents almost immediately after construction. Entire families allegedly lived down there in conditions that were, by any measure, brutal. No light, minimal ventilation, crime, illness, and desperation were rampant. And then there's Burke and Hare, the infamous duo who, in the 1820s, allegedly committed a series of murders specifically to sell the bodies to a local medical school for dissection, since demand for cadavers far outpaced the legal supply at the time. They were caught, one was executed, and the case exposed a deeply uncomfortable truth about how medical science was advancing during that era. Edinburgh is a stunning city with incredible history, but walking those cobblestone streets hits differently when you know what was happening beneath them and in the shadows between them. Let's head somewhere sunnier, the beaches of Normandy, France. And this one's a little different, because unlike some of the other places on this list, Normandy's history isn't hidden. It's honored. The D-Day landings of June 6, 1944 are one of the most documented military operations in human history, and the beaches Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juneau, Sword draw visitors from around the world who come specifically to pay their respects. But the sheer scale of what happened there in a single day is something that numbers alone struggle to capture. Thousands of young men, many of them teenagers, lost their lives on those beaches and in the waters approaching them. The operation involved over 150,000 Allied troops crossing the English Channel in a military effort that was, by any strategic definition, a massive gamble. Walking those beaches today, with the waves coming in gently and the sky wide and blue, there's a profound dissonance between how peaceful it looks and what it witnessed. The American cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer, overlooking Omaha Beach, has over 9,000 white marble markers stretching across the hillside. If you ever needed a single image to understand the weight of war, that's it. Normandy isn't a place that hides its past. It holds it, and it asks you to hold it too. Now, for something that genuinely unsettles people when they find out, the island of Hashima, off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan. Locally known as Gunkanjima or Battleship Island, it looks like something straight out of a post-apocalyptic film set, and in a way, that's exactly what it is. In its peak years in the mid-20th century, Hashima was one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Coal miners and their families packed into concrete apartment blocks on this tiny island, with virtually no escape. The coal industry boomed there for decades, and then, almost overnight, it didn't. When petroleum replaced coal as Japan's primary energy source in the 1970s, the island was abandoned. Residents left within 3 months, and Hashima has sat empty ever since. But here's the part of the story that often goes untold. During World War II, Korean and Chinese laborers were allegedly brought to the island under forced conditions to work in the mines. The working environment was already notoriously brutal, and the treatment of these workers has been the subject of significant international debate, particularly as Japan sought to have Hashima recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. South Korea formally objected, arguing that the site's full history, including the alleged forced labor, needed to be acknowledged alongside any heritage designation. It's a dispute that's still ongoing, and it's a reminder that how we choose to memorialize places says a lot about what we're willing to confront. And finally, New Orleans, Louisiana, one of the most beloved cities in the United States. The food, the music, the architecture, the culture. It's a city like genuinely no other. But New Orleans also sits at the intersection of some of the most painful history in American life, and much of that history is literally woven into the streets and buildings that tourists admire every day. The city was one of the largest slave trading hubs in the entire country before the Civil War. The domestic slave trade that passed through New Orleans affected hundreds of thousands of lives, and historians have worked extensively to document the human cost of what happened there. Some of the most elegant antebellum mansions that appear on tour routes were built by, and for the profit of, that system. There's also the story of LaLaurie Mansion on Royal Street, a stunning 1830s home that now draws visitors because of its allegedly horrific history. Delphine LaLaurie, its 19th century owner, was publicly regarded as a prominent socialite. But following a fire at the property in 1834, rescuers allegedly discovered conditions in the home that horrified even the community of the time, leading to a mob driving LaLaurie out of the city entirely. She allegedly fled to France and never returned. The mansion still stands. It's been through many owners since, including, at one point, Nicolas Cage, and it remains one of the most visited haunted sites in a city full of them. But the real history of New Orleans doesn't live in ghost stories. It lives in the streets named for French colonizers, in the music born from suffering and resistance, in the food that tells a story of cultural survival against impossible odds. New Orleans is a city of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary pain, and you can feel both at the same time if you're willing to look. Here's the thing about all of these places: they didn't become popular despite their histories. In many cases, that history, even when it's buried or softened, is part of what gives them their weight, their texture. The reason a place like Normandy or New Orleans or Edinburgh feels like something when you're standing in it. Travel is one of the most powerful things a person can do, and part of what makes it powerful is being willing to ask what happened here, really happened before you arrived. Because the places that shape the world aren't always the ones that look the most peaceful. Sometimes they're the ones that have the most to say, if you're willing to listen.